Okay. So when do I start? At 7?
7, yeah. Like anytime. Go ahead straight away now.
Okay, right, I'm at 7 now. Okay, bye.
Good luck. Bye.
So they can hear me. Well, hello everybody. I guess you can hear me. So I'm Bernardine Evaristo, and I am introducing this event, which is brought to you by At Home with the Four Indies. And the Four Indies are Lingham's Bookshop, Booker Bookshop, Bookish Bookshop, and Forum Bookshop. And I'm going to be talking to you for the next half an hour or so. Can someone just send me a message so that I know you can hear me and see me? Yes, 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 good, good. You can hear me and see me. Okay, so hello everybody. Panic over. Here I am. I'm in my study at home. It's really hot, and I don't normally, I'm not usually in here in the evening because it's so hot. But this is where the Ethernet is, and I think the Ethernet will give me a better reception. So I'm going to talk to you about my novel, Girl, Woman, Other, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a reading from it, and then I'm going to answer some questions. I guess most of you know about the book, or you've heard of the book by now, which for me is just such a treat because I've been writing for a very long time, and I usually have to introduce myself to people, and nobody's heard of me, So it's really nice that this book is doing so well. The novel is about 12 primarily Black British women, or Womxn, which is how I pronounce Womxn, which is women of colour and trans inclusive. And that is reflected in the book for anyone who's read it. There is one character who is non-binary. I wrote the book, as I imagine most people know, because I simply wanted to extend the representation of who Black women are in fiction. I just got to a point in 2013 where I was just so fed up. There were so few of us writing, and we just weren't appearing in novels because we weren't writing ourselves in novels. Not that it should only be us, but we weren't writing ourselves in novels because we weren't getting published. And there were just a handful of writers. I just thought, I'm going to do something about it and put as many women as I can into a single novel, and that's what I did. And that was my overriding objective. And then the novel, as it transpired, as I wrote it, became this book about 12 interconnected Womxn, and it was looking at all these areas of life, of society, but refracted through their lives. And they will be things like, race is there, obviously, class, gender, sexuality, occupations, preoccupations, family relationships, migration status, identity to a point. And I always say identity to a point because often writing by writers of colour is always kind of reduced to being about identity. And this book, I don't see, it's about so much more than just identity. And you can also say that any book is about identity. So so this for me, it was a very simple starting point, but it ended up being a very complex book. And because their lives are interconnected, and because the span of the novel is over 100 years, going back into the 19th century, which is very important for me. If I could have done, I would have gone even deeper into history, but it wasn't just going to be manageable within the scope of the novel as it was. So it was. The other thing about the book is that it's multi-generational, intergenerational. That was also really important, to have this scope of ages, 19 to 93. Every generation represented. So in every way that I could, I tried to just show the plurality of Black British womanhood. And sorry, let me turn my phone off. The plurality of Black womanhood, and also to just explore our shared humanity, because that's what we are as human beings. That's what we do as writers. We write about our humanity, and it's our shared humanity. Because when you strip everything away, that's who we are. We're just all human beings. And a lot of people get that from the book, and I really, really do enjoy that kind of reception. So I created the characters from my own memory. So I've lived a long time. I'm 61, and I always say that because people think I'm younger, and I just want people to know that I've lived a long life, and that the kind of success I've had with Girl, Woman, Other has come after a 40-year career, because so much of our society is about being young and fresh and, sort of on trend and in your 20s. And a lot of people think that if you don't achieve things in your 20s, then you're never going to achieve them. And that is so ridiculous, but it's something that I think haunts a lot of people. And I come across it with my students. I'm a professor of creative writing at Brunel University, London. And my students, when they're turning 22, they're panicking. It's like, oh my God, I'm 22. I said, my God, you're at the beginning of your life and you've got an exciting, hopefully, adventure ahead of you. So the age thing was important. And I also think that I was able to write that spread of characters in the way that I did because of my age, going backwards to teenagers and, imagining somebody at the age of 93. So these are all some of the things I was thinking about. Oh yes, I know what I was saying. I was saying that I created the characters from my own personal research, and by that I like to describe it as my life. So I come from a large family. I have sisters, and I have had black women friends from my teenage years, because I grew up in a very white area, so I didn't have black friends as a child. But certainly from my teenage years, I've had black women friends from all over the world. And I've known lots of people, and I've known lots of people of colour. And all of that goes into the mix in terms of creating characters. Some of the characters I had to do some research. So Carol's a banker. I had to look into what kind of job she would have and how to find a way to describe that. Hattie's a farmer, so I had to do a lot of research into farming, especially earlier in the 20th century. And Shirley's a school teacher. My mother was a school teacher, and she left teaching, I think, at the very early 90s. And I was asking her about what it was like to be a teacher during the Thatcher years. And a lot of what she told me I put into Shirley's story. Yaz is kind of loosely based on one of my godchildren, who is now in her 20s. But I remember her when she was about 18, 19, and very, very bright and feisty individual. So she was my muse for that character. Amma is loosely based on my younger self. So Amma is not me, and I was not Amma as she was as a young person. But I was very much part of the community that Amma is in London, and I really wanted to write about that community. So Amma came out of that, and I really like the idea of having her starting the novel. It says woman, she's a black lesbian, she's a theatre maker, she's had a very kind of alternative lifestyle, and to present that kind of person to the reader, who probably, most of whom would not know somebody like Amma, I would imagine. So these are some of the ideas that came into the creation of the novel. What I'm going to do now is give you a little reading. It's from page 36, so it's quite early in the book, and it's Amma's section, and she's talking about giving birth to Yaz. So as I said, Amma is gay, and Roland is her baby father, basically. So he's also gay, and he's the father of Yaz, and they have an arrangement that they're going to create this child, and they do. And Shirley, who I mentioned, who is a school teacher, is Amma's friend from her childhood. Yaz was born 19 years ago in a birthing pool in Amma's candle-lit living room, surrounded by incense, the music of lapping waves, a douala and midwife, Shirley and Roland, her great friend, who'd agreed to father her child when the death of her parents triggered an unprecedented and all-consuming broodiness. Luckily for her, Roland, 5 years into his partnership with Kenny, had also been thinking about fatherhood. He took Yaz every other weekend, as agreed, which Amma regretted when she found herself missing her newborn instead of feeling deliriously free from Friday afternoons to Sunday evenings. Yaz was the miracle she never thought she wanted, and having a child really did complete her, something she rarely confided because it somehow seemed anti-feminist. Yaz was going to be her countercultural experiment. She breastfed her wherever she happened to be and didn't care who was offended at a mother's need to feed her child. She took her everywhere, strapped to her back or across her front in a sling, deposited her in the corner of rehearsal rooms or on the table at meetings. She took her on tour on trains and planes in a travel cot that looked more like a carry-all, once almost sending her through the airport scanner, begging them not to arrest her over it. She created the position of 7 godmothers and 2 godfathers to ensure there be a supply of babysitters for when her child was no longer quite so compliant and portable. Yaz was allowed to wear exactly what she liked, so long as she wasn't endangering herself or her health. She wanted her to be self-expressed before they tried to crush her child's free spirit through the oppressive regimentation of the education system. She has a photo of her daughter walking down the street wearing a plastic Roman army breastplate over an orange tutu, white fairy wings, a pair of yellow shorts over red and white stripy leggings, a different shoe on each foot, a sandal and a welly, lipstick smudged on her lips, cheeks and forehead, a phase, and her hair tied into an assortment of bunches with miniature dolls hanging off the ends. Amma ignored the pitying or judgmental looks from passers-by and small-minded mothers at the playground or nursery. Yaz was never told off for speaking her mind, although she was told off for swearing because she needed to develop her vocabulary. Yaz, say you find Marissa unpleasant or unlikable, rather than describing her as a shit-faced smelly bottom. And although she didn't always get what she wanted, if she argued her case strongly enough, she was in with a chance. Amma wanted her daughter to be free, feminist and powerful. Later, she took her on personal development courses for children to give her the confidence and articulacy to flourish in any setting. Big mistake. Mum, Yaz said at 14, when she was pitching to go to Reading Music Festival with her friends, "It would be to the detriment of my juvenile development if you curtailed my activities at this critical stage in my journey towards becoming the independent-minded and fully self-expressed adult you expect me to be. I mean, do you really want me rebelling against your old-fashioned rules by running away from the safety of my home to live on the streets and having to resort to prostitution to survive and thereafter drug addiction, crime, anorexia, and abusive relationships with exploitative bastards twice my age before my early demise in a crack house?" Amma fretted the whole weekend her little daughter was away. Adult men had been ogling her since before puberty. There are a lot more paedophiles out there than people realise. So I'll leave it there. My glasses keep slipping down my nose and I don't know where the other ones are. It's because I'm sweating. Anyhow, so a little taster of the book. All the characters are very different. So you've got a strong sense of Amma as this kind of feisty, strong, powerful woman. And then you've got somebody like Bumi, who's a Nigerian immigrant who has a degree in maths but comes here and the only job she can get is as a cleaner, true to life. And you have Megan Morgan, who becomes non-binary and lives in the north of England. You have Hattie, who I mentioned as a farmer. So they're all, I tried to make them as different as possible. And yet there are sort of X degrees of separation between them. So they're all kind of connected. So I have some questions. Okay, you say on your website, writing is an adventure, a journey into the unknown, and I enjoy liberating myself from the shackles of convention. Can you tell us a little more about you as a storyteller and what interests you? That's true. So that is what I wrote for my website, and that is how I feel about it. I'm a very creative person, and I love working with my imagination, and I've been in the arts now for so long, and that's been the focus of my life. And I find it incredibly rewarding. And it's my way of having my own thumbprint in the world. That's how I see my creativity. Because when you're a creative person, unless you're imitating others, you're creating something new and original. And it's a very exciting thing to be a part of, and you never know quite what you're going to create. So when I start a book, I don't quite know how it's going to turn out. I have an idea. Sometimes I have something of a plan, a very, very loose plan. I don't really plot as such. And then it grows organically until it becomes the beast that it becomes. and I go through many drafts, full drafts of my novels, but also every line, every sentence is worked and reworked because my background is in poetry. So I'm really somebody who crafts language on the page. So even before it gets to full draft stage, I will have reworked, you know, sentences, paragraphs, pages, until I move on to the next page. So that's part of my creative process. So there's the sort of the original flow of the creativity, if it is a flow. Not all books are quite as free-flowing as, for example, Girl, Woman, Other was. And then there's the shaping and the honing and the discipline of editing, and I love doing that. And that is, in a sense, the most important part of the creative process. So I talk about the shackles of convention. Anybody who knows my work will know that my work is generally quite experimental. Verse novels, a novel with verse. Even when I've written straight prose, there is some kind of experiment in how I've structured the work, and also perhaps my use of language or just the idea of a book. So Blonde Roots was a book I wrote about slavery, as published in 2008, and it's a kind of prose novel, but I was reading some of it recently because I had to talk about it, and I was thinking, oh, it's quite poetic actually. So I always thought it's a kind of straightforward prose novel, but actually it's not really. But the really important thing for me was the experiment was to create a world where Africans enslaved Europeans, and it ended up being a satirical novel with lots of tragedy in it, obviously, because it's about slavery. But that's for me the joy. So I take a subject matter, and I'm interested in the African diaspora, especially from a British perspective. I take a story and I can do what I like with it and turn it into something magical. And that's the creative process, and I don't feel bound by what anybody around me is telling me I should be writing. So I give myself freedom in terms of subject matter and also form. And so I don't write the kinds of novels that are what we might call traditional novels. Girl, Woman, Other, I created this form called fusion fiction, and it's it's a lot of unorthodox grammar and very few capitals, hardly any full stops, and what I call a pro-poetic patterning on the page. And that is an experiment, and it's the joy of it. I haven't actually written a book like that before. Also, all these individual kind of narratives that somehow coalesce as a complete novel. So Shackles of Convention and the journey into the unknown and adventure of it. That's why we create. If I can't imagine having a life where I don't get to create things. And of course, we know there are lots of professions where it isn't about using necessarily your creativity. It's about doing the job. I mean, I'm not saying that people aren't creative, because they are creative, but it's about just doing the job. Whereas people in the arts, visual artists, dancers, it's so much of it is about individual expression and how we bring our individuality to our creativity and our practice. And that's really what I enjoy. So I'm going to take a question now from somebody. Let's see, let's go down. Oh, right, that's good. Oh, yes, and, I think you might have heard that it won, the novel won the Indie Book Award today for Best Fiction. And thrilled, absolutely thrilled by that. But you can, and this is Indie Bookshop Week. So what I would like to do now is just deviate slightly and just to sort of give you this shout out for independent bookshops. I first came across novels and books by black women and women of colour and women around the world from one bookshop called Sister Right, which I actually mention in Girl, Woman, Other. Dominique goes there, and it used to be this bookshop in Islington, and it was probably in existence for about 20 years, and it was the only place where you could go to buy books by women from around the world, and all kinds of women, and queer books there, and the sort of traditional bookshops in the UK would not sell those books. So for me, the independent bookshop scene is really, really important. And also, the huge sort of national companies obviously have a role to play, but we need to support independent bookshops, especially because of the pandemic and the fact that they had to shut, and a lot of them struggle to make ends meet anyway. And there are lots around now, and there was a time when they weren't around, where a lot of them shut up because of, you know, sort of monopolization of bookshops. So shout out for independent bookshops. Now let me get another question here. Oh right, congratulations, thank you. Okay, can't see any questions, so I'm gonna use one of these. In 2019, Girl, Woman, Other won the Booker Prize. How did you feel for you as a writer? Was it the moment that you had been waiting for? What is your view of writing awards? The Booker is, they talk about it as the most important prize for the novel in the world. And winning it has completely revolutionized my career in every way possible. And I'm really not cool about this at all. I was ecstatic to win it with Margaret Atwood, who's a great woman. And don't ask me how I feel about Margaret Atwood, because everybody asks me about, you know, sharing it with Margaret Atwood, and it was fantastic. You know, who else? I mean, it was just amazing to share it with her. She's a fantastic writer, a fantastic feminist, and a fantastic woman. And I will take the Booker Prize any way it comes. So it was an amazing experience. It's not, okay, so the Booker Prize is something that one wants, especially if you're struggling as a writer and you don't have a big readership, and that was the case for me before. But it's not that I was writing to win the Booker, because I write because I have to write. It's in my DNA now. It's my creativity. It's why I breathe. It's the focus of my life. It's what I love doing. I'm passionate about it. And I don't compromise my writing in any way. And that's also what's interesting about winning the Booker. I won the Booker with a very uncompromising book. And I was the first black woman to win it, and which is shameful. And the first black British person to win it, which is also shameful. But I won it with a book that is about women who are, you know, often seen as outsiders, several of whom are on the queer spectrum, working class women. It wasn't what people might consider to be a Booker type book from the past, I would suggest. And I can justify that because I don't think this book would have won the Booker 10 years ago. Maybe not even 5 years ago. Times have changed. And also there's scope for much more scope for experimental writers these days. So the Booker Prize changed my career, changed how I'm seen, changed all the opportunities that are coming my way. Translation rights is now sold into 30 territories, film, television. It was Book at Bedtime a couple of weeks ago. Everything has just been incredible, and I am really enjoying it because I am 61 and nothing is a hassle for me. No aspect of it. I have no negative responses to it at all. And I think that would be incredibly ungrateful if I were to have any kind of whinging about it, because, you know, my life is very full on because of it, but I really relish every opportunity that comes my way. My view of writing awards is I set up one myself, the Complete Works. Sorry, no, that was something else I set up. The Brunel International African Poetry Prize. And I set it up to develop African poetry in 2012. It's now going to go into its 8th year. And it has, with another organisation called the African Poetry Book Fund, quietly, slowly revolutionised African poetry, because there weren't many African poets about. But this prize has focused the attention on African poetry, and then working with the African Poetry Book Fund, who produce these pamphlets, and we judge each other's prizes. You know, African poetry has become a force in the world. And that wouldn't have happened without the prize. And the prize has gone to a single writer, it's gone to 2 writers, and a couple of years ago it went to 3 writers. So where there isn't an outright winner, I'm very open to the judges deciding to award it to the 3 top writers, because for me that is about sharing the love. So this prize is a prize that is about more than developing an individual's career. And that's one of the most important things about prizes. If a prize can do more than just promote one individual. And I am an activist, so I have got this prize. the booker, and I have a bigger platform, and I am using that bigger platform as an activist, especially in the literary world. So even though I won it as an individual and it's hugely benefited my career, I am taking people with me, and I'm not saying that to boast or show off, and it's what I've always done, but people are listening to me and I have more of a following, and I'm taking those people with me, my community with me, and I think it's so important because I know what it's like to be left behind, definitely. And I think winning a prize, with it, for me, comes the responsibility to continue to do what I do, but on perhaps a macro scale, and to be more impactful with it, with the activism. So those are some of my thoughts about prizes. I think prizes are less successful when they go to the usual suspects. So yeah. Okay, let's see if there's any questions here. Love your mature perspective. Yes, I'm very mature. Let's see. It's good. Oh, what is the biggest struggle you have encountered as a writer? I think it changes. So in my 20s, I was writing for theatre, running a theatre company, Theatre of Black Women, and learning how to be a writer without much help. It was just learning through doing. I hadn't studied English at university. I went to drama school, trained to be an actor. And while I wrote for theatre while at drama school, we weren't really trained to write scripts as such. So it was my early writing was very experimental. And I was just struggling to understand writing for theatre. And then I left theatre behind and continued to write poetry. But I never went to, I think I went to one workshop with people who also were very new to poetry. So I didn't really understand poetry. So it took me a long time to get my voice as a writer. And in fact, my first book, Island of Abraham, which was published in '94, I don't really mention it anymore. Not that I think it's a bad book, but I think it's very much my early work. And I hadn't really found my voice. I was writing the sort of poems, or I was writing in a sort of style that I thought I should be writing. And so the early struggle as a writer was about finding my voices and developing my confidence, and also developing my discipline, my motivation, my commitment, because being a writer involves thousands of hours of writing on your own. Even if you're in a room with other people, you're essentially, you have to call up your own creative resources to create, to write whatever it is you want to write. And then in my 30s, my big book in my 30s was a book called Lara, which was based on my family history, and that actually took 5 years to write. Girl, Woman, Other took 5 years to write. But Lara took 5 years to write because for the first 2 years I wrote it as a prose novel, having never really written prose fiction before. And I lost the spirit of poetry on the page. It was just very, my writing was very literal and dull, boring, prosaic. And then I turned it into a verse novel, and that took 3 years. And it was a slow process for me because I wanted to be a great writer, but I had to overcome all the anxiety and the doubt and the lack of support. I was on my own. I was living on my own at that stage, and I was just reading. I was learning how to write through reading. Today, people go and do courses and they do degrees and write up to PhDs, but I didn't do that. And the kinds of poetry courses, for example, that were available probably up until the noughties, I couldn't go to them because I felt they were white. White people were running them, and predominantly they were attended by white people. And I didn't think there would be a space for me and my politics. And I didn't want to have somebody imposing their aesthetic on me. And that's another issue. Poetry, culture, diversity, all those things. That's something I've been very involved in for a long time. And I didn't want to put myself in that position. And I used to get books on how to write poetry, and it was so alien to me. And the country's leading poetry magazine, Poetry Review, at that stage, to me felt so traditional and stultifying, and it just wasn't inspiring me as a writer, I got my inspiration from African American women, African American women poets like Audre Lorde and Ntozake Shange. Their work came alive on the page for me, and they were talking about black women. That's what I needed. That. So that was the struggle, you know. And then each book has its own challenges, and then there's the struggle of writing for so many years, publishing my own books from the 90s, but actually I was first published in the 80s. So you're talking about, you know, going up towards 40 years of being published, being creative, working in the arts, and never really breaking through, but being really ambitious, which is a good thing, by the way. We, all of us women, I think it's mainly women here, we have to be ambitious. You know, part of the problem is we're not ambitious enough. So I was really ambitious, and I had this real desire to break through and for my work to be known in the world. And I do mean in the world, I don't just mean in this country. But it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. And seeing all these shooting stars around me, you know, who were just like publishing and going off into the stratosphere. And I felt like a plodder. Yet I was getting good reviews, and I was building my career, and a lot of people would have said I was successful, but I wasn't successful in the way that I wanted to be. I wanted people to know my work. Writing a book that takes years and then you sell a few hundred copies or a few thousand is not satisfactory. You know, you want that, I want that readership. So yeah, okay. Let's see. So this is an interesting question. Oh, I didn't mention the names of the people who... Anyway, this is from Linda Tunnicliffe. Apparently I am colourblind. When you won the award with Margaret Atwood and they made a big thing about you being the first black person to win the Booker Prize, I couldn't understand why they were singling you out for the colour of your skin. To me, you were an author of a great book that won the prize. Does that offend you? Not at all. I was the one who singled myself out as the first black person to win the Booker, black woman to win the Booker, because when I gave my acceptance speech, I said that because it was something that most people hadn't noticed, that a black woman hadn't won it. So we won't go into whether people can be colourblind or not. I mean, my mother's white and she married a black man in the 1950s, and she said she was colourblind. She didn't see my father's colour, she just saw him. So that's an interesting, you know, reality for some people, I guess. But it was really important because in this society we want to be equal partners. You know, there's this idea of this social contract you have with your society, that your behaviour and everything is part of you all being part of a community. And if you're denied things, or you're alienated, or you're marginalised, then that's unjust. It's totally unjust. And so it's really important to make the point about being a black woman and a black woman writer, and being a black writer. And actually I'm writing something at the moment about Toni Morrison. And what I loved about Toni Morrison is that she said, yes, I'm an African American writer. That's what I am. That's what I write about. And she owned it and claimed it. And a lot of people are very sheepish about claiming that because they feel it's reducing the, you know, that they feel it's boxing them in and somehow limiting them and making their art reductive. But actually, then you're saying that blackness is limiting, and it's not. It's no more limiting than whiteness. It means if you're writing as a black writer about black things, then you are writing about, you know, as much about the world as anybody else. How many black people are there in the world? There's over 1 billion in Africa, 52 countries, thousands of languages, and then however many in America and all over the world. So Caribbean, the diaspora. So actually it's something that is about, as I talk about a lot, the infinite possibilities of who we are. And that's what I'm interested in writing. Let's see. Okay. So, oh, this is one. Whilst in education, did someone spot your potential as a writer? No. No. I liked English at school, but I was really into drama, so I was very active in the school drama club, and I went to a youth theatre, and that's how I ended up at drama school. I did not shine at school other than in drama. I went to a girls' grammar school, and I wasn't that committed to studying, but the standard was high, and I graduated with so many O levels, but I my heart wasn't really in academic subjects. I was only interested in things that I was really passionate about, and that would be English and that would be drama. I was kind of interested in the classics as well, some interest in languages. Wasn't interested in science, couldn't do maths, but at the same time nobody took my hand, held my hand and said, look, this is how you do it. So I think maybe that would have been different if I'd have had that kind of support. And then I went to drama school and I wasn't singled out. And then when I started writing for theatre and for my own theatre company and publishing poetry and anthologies, I wasn't singled out. And when I published my first book, Island of Abraham, I wasn't singled out. So, sometimes people think that if you have that, that's what's going to keep you going. Somebody who's nurturing you. I've always had people who've supported me. But in terms of in my education, just being singled out, no, not at all. And I think that's a good thing, actually, because you develop your inner strength, your inner resilience, your inner determination. I think if things are given to you too easily, and if you're too supported in your endeavours, then what's going to happen when that support goes? You have to fail. I don't even believe in the term failure, but you can't have things going your own way. So with younger writers who want everything straight away, I sometimes say to them, it's good not to get it straight away. I didn't get it straight away. It took how long it took me, but look at where I am now. Because if you get it straight away, you don't develop those skills, those life skills that you need that are going to keep you going through the difficult times, because it's not always going to be good. Everybody goes through difficult times. And so all those years that I was writing and not breaking through in a big way, but I've been published by Penguin for 20 years, so it's not like I wasn't able to get published. But all those years of just kind of getting on with the work has made me somebody who is unstoppable. Absolutely, I am unstoppable. And that's because I have all those years of building those skills. If something comes to you too easily, then you don't build those skills, or you have to build them later, and it can be extremely painful. Okay. Someone's just said life skills so important. They are indeed. What have you been reading in lockdown? So if you follow me on Twitter, that's the main place, but also, a little bit on Facebook, although I've almost reached my full capacity. So, but if you follow me on Twitter and sometimes on Instagram, you will get the recommendations of books that I'm doing. And I do recommend books quite a lot. At the moment, I'm talking about several books. A book called The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, which has just been published. It's by an African-American writer. She's only 30, which surprises me because she is so good. She's brilliant. And it's about two sisters who live in America. It's set over a period of 30 years, ending in the 90s. And they're very, very light-skinned black women, and one passes and one doesn't. It's a really interesting subject matter, and she does a really good job with it. I also recommend Rainbow Milk by Paul Mendez, who is a young gay black writer in this country, and it's about him growing up in a Jehovah's Witness family and community, and he's gay, right? So there's problems there. And then he escapes to London, and it's about his life in London, which is quite wild, actually. And the book is very graphic, so be careful if you're a bit faint-hearted. I also recommend Jacob Ross's book, Black Rain Falling, which is a crime fiction novel set in the Caribbean. I have known Jacob Ross since the 80s, and he is the most amazing writer. And now he's writing crime fiction books, and they're absolutely brilliant. And he's a very literary writer. So what you get is crime fiction, but it's very literary. And let me think, and fourth book, what have I read recently? Can't think. I do tend to promote the books from my community, especially if those books don't get the attention that I think they need, and often they don't, for various reasons. And so it's not that I only read those books, but those are the books that I tend to mention when I'm asked. Black books, basically, often Black British books. Let's see what else is there. So excited to read The Vanishing Half. Bought my copy this week from an indie, of course. Very good. All right, okay. So let me find one here. Oh, right. I love the intimacy of this book, Go Woman Other. How we as readers get to see the internal world of each character. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach and structure of the novel? Is this how you planned it to be from the beginning, this magnifying of women's lives? So I kind of covered that a bit, but what I will talk about is the intimacy of the book, and that is getting inside the women's lives. And that is about exploring, for me, it's about exploring their psychology. So what we do as writers, and I'm sure some of you are novelists and writers and so on, poets, is that we explore the interior life. And I'm very much a literary writer. So you won't get me writing the kinds of books that I think are more surface, but they're very plot driven. I'm very much interested in two things, language and characterization. And I'm really interested in the interior life of my characters, because I'm really interested in the interior life, I was going to say material life, in the interior life of us as human beings. I'm a very curious person. I'm a very nosy person. I actually love gossip, because through gossip you get to hear what's really going on often, and not what's presented. And I just like working out who people are, what makes them tick, how they get to be the people that they are. So one of the things the book does is explain, in a sense, through their stories, how their journey from childhood through to the point at which we meet them in the book. And that is about what makes us human. What is it in the family background, their experiences, the obstacles they face that have created this person, the culture they come from, the dreams they have. And so the interior life of who we are is the most interesting thing. So yes, and that is very something that can be expressed through their intimacy, and intimacy is also expressed through their relationships. So trying to create these multifaceted, complex characters who aren't in any way binary in the sense of good or bad, either or, and then to look at their vulnerabilities, their frailties, their dreams, their disappointments, the trauma maybe some of them have gone through, and then to use that to create people who are realistic, believable, and maybe likable. It doesn't matter if they're likable or not, but may be likable. So okay, so one last question about the book. Where are we? This is a novel that deserves to be read aloud and to be performed and celebrated in all kinds of media. Are there plans for this to happen? Yes. So, as I mentioned, it was adapted for BBC Book at Bedtime, and it ran over 10 days, twice a day, and it's now on BBC Sounds or iPlayer. And they reduced it, the writer Patricia Campo reduced it from 120,000 words to 24,000 words. And she did a really good job. It's just one actress reading it, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I really loved it. They just, the writer really captured the spirit of it, even though so much of the detail was lost. And the performer was so fantastic, and the way it was produced was lovely. So that was that. And as I said, it is still accessible, so you can listen to it all. Probably download it. It's being developed for a television drama, I really hope it gets made. A lot of things go into development and don't get made, but somehow I think this book will get made. So I'm really excited by that. And another book of mine, the previous one, Mr. Loverman, is also in development for a television drama. So we'll see about that. And we're having conversations with it about a theatre production, creating a theatre production from it, not with me writing it, with someone else writing it. And that I find that really exciting because I love theatre, I come from theatre, and I go to a lot of theatre, and I just want to see those 12 Womackson on the stage doing their thing, and I just love the idea of casting it. I mean, I won't be casting it. They might not listen to me because it's the director and producer who casts. But there are so many terrific black actresses out there of every age and generation, and I just think it's going to be sublime. That excites me so much to see them on hopefully a big stage, and to see see how it works. Okay, let's see now. I think that's it actually. Oh, no, I said I was going to answer another question, didn't I? Oh, right. So this is one. How are you adapting and responding to this pandemic? Can you write yourself out of the anxiety of it? I was anxious originally, the first few weeks when it happened, and nobody knew what the risks were really. It was scary, I have to say. It was really scary going into a supermarket and looking at the shelves and they were empty and thinking, oh my God, am I going to struggle to be fed now because these idiots, the supermarket raiders, have come and just stocked up on everything. I have eczema, and I did have to get a few bottles of eczema because I thought, well, if I don't get my eczema lotion, then I'm really going to be stuffed. So I had to, anyway, so that was very anxiety making. I was also looking after an elderly relative some of the week as a carer, and I was so worried about that because this person is 86 years old, and I was so worried about catching it and giving it to this person. I was upset that I wasn't really upset, but everything that I had planned was cancelled, and this year was going to be a big year of a lot of travel to a lot of festivals, and it's like everything shut down, and it was very scary. And but as it progressed and we got used to it, and I got used to keeping myself safe and my husband safe and my mother in particular and other people safe. I just gave the game away there, didn't I? Never mind. And I wasn't anxious anymore. So I'm not anxious about it anymore because I know what I need to do. I'm kind of anxious about the idiots who go and, sit on really crowded beaches, and I'm anxious that we're going to have a second round of it, and that people aren't behaving themselves and so on. And I'm, worried about all the people out there who are really suffering under this pandemic for all the reasons we can imagine. But my personal life, I find it quite peaceful. Not going out. I don't really miss socializing, and I am a very sociable person, and I've been doing a lot of writing. Not a book, because I haven't started a new book, but I've been doing a lot of commissions, all kinds of commissions, creative commissions, critical commissions, and a lot of interviews as well, through virtual interviews, which I've kind of got used to now, I guess. So yeah, so I haven't really written myself out of anxiety because I don't really have anxiety. I'm not a person who worries anyway. I really try and nip that in the bud. So I try to develop a really positive mental attitude about everything. Okay, so So Lingham's Booksellers says we have lots of copies, folks, you can pick up. Oh, you're saying very nice things about me. Thank you. Melanie Libbard, black actress, being awesome. Is that? I think I might recognise that name. I think we're going to finish there. This has been really interesting, but a bit odd because I can't see anybody, and it's almost like you're not there. But hey ho, this is the way things are now. So thank you to all of you, whoever you are, wherever you are, I don't even know if you're in the UK or whether you're international, for tuning in. And yeah, follow me on my platforms and you can keep update, I'll keep you updated on what I'm doing with my working life. And thank you very much to the, I've forgotten the name now, to the At Home with the Four Indies for asking me to do this and for this platform. And thank you to the Indie Book Awards for giving me this lovely prize. And I got a book token and I got some gorgeous wild flowers and I got a beautiful certificate, framed certificate, which is absolutely gorgeous because I like really bright colours and it's just perfect colours for me. And yeah, I think that's it. So yeah, so stay well, look after yourselves, and have a good weekend. Okay, bye.